Hello, welcome to my presentation on the art of haiku, a compilation of all that I have learned during my year abroad. My name is Olga Tuttle, and I am an American with a love of all sorts of media and literature. I've had a strong interest in poetries of all kinds since I was very young, and one of the best examples, definitely my favorite book, Inside Out and Back Again, by Tang He Lai. I was granted the chance to study haiku on a cultural studies visa this past year by Labo, and I'd like to share with you some of what I've learned. But first, what is haiku? Haiku is a Japanese form of short poetry, recognizable by its iconic 5-7-5 phrase structure. It typically displays some aspect of nature or daily life. The history of haiku is a long one, starting all the way back with waka, one of the oldest forms of written poetry in Japan. Waka encompasses a wide range of styles, but is often synonymous with tanka poetry in modern usage. From waka came renga, a long-form collaborative poetry style which alternates between phrases of 5-7-5 and 7-7 until reaching 100 total phrases. The first renga can be traced back to AD 759 when the Man-yoshu was compiled. The Man-yoshu was a collection of waka and renga poetry that held more than 4,000 poems. Renga is a social art form and must be completed between at least 2 people, but often has upwards of 10 contributors. It was used in times of war as a way to strengthen bonds between soldiers and samurai. Renga also has a total of 100 phrases. The opening phrase is called a greeting phrase, which is set to the 5-7-5 meter. This greeting phrase is what would eventually evolve into the art form we know today as haiku. During the Edo period, renga would branch off into another form of itself called haikai renga. Haikai renga shares the same basic rules as renga, but it incorporates looser and more casual language. Haikai renga became popular with the common class as a pastime. Finally, we have haikai hoku, which was a result of taking the first 5-7-5 phrase of haikai renga and polishing it into its own standalone piece. It is essentially the same as the haiku we have today, just with a different name. Matsuo Basho is regarded as the father of haiku, which he would have called haikai hoku during his time. He made the art form very popular with his style called shofu haiku. Despite its original popularity during Basho's time, by the start of Meiji-era Japan, interest in haikai hoku and Japanese traditional arts began to dwindle, with many poets turning to the new ideas of the Western world. One man who opposed this change in interests, Masaoka Shiki, would repopularize the art of haikai hoku. Masaoka Shiki worked to keep the art of haikai hoku alive by starting his own school and teaching others about the importance and beauty of haikai hoku. Many students were inspired by him and carried on his legacy. Alongside his other teachings, Masaoka Shiki insisted on the use of the name haiku rather than haikai hoku, and so we still use this term today, haiku. So, how did I research haiku while I was in Japan? Well, first, I formed a goal. My goal was to understand the methods that haiku poets use in their work and incorporate it into my own. To do this, I started with input. finding lots of material to put into my brain and try to think about as many new topics as I could. I read a myriad of informative sources, including how-to books, online guides in both Japanese and English, and collections of haiku made by other poets. The most notable of these how-to books were Yasashi Haiku Irimon by Abe Genki and Tsuji Momoko, and Chotto Soko Made Odekake Haiku by Kisaragi Mana and Tsuji Momoko. I also made use of online saijiki, or collections of seasonal words, like a dictionary. I used kigosai.sub.jp and worldkigodatabase.blogspot.com the most. The use of online tools allowed me to research topics further and find additional resources pertaining to particularly dated or difficult kigo, like what masters like Matsuo Basho might have used. The community I found online was very helpful in correcting my poetry and assisting with basic Japanese errors, especially before I'd had the chance to join a kukai. When I finally did have the chance to join a kukai, however, the experience was indispensable. Not only did I have the chance to read others' phrases and learn about the meaning or event behind each, but I also got to share my own haiku as well. After I'd got all that in my brain, how did I put it on paper? Well, I tried writing my own phrases as I went along, incorporating new elements as I learned. Initially, my focus was entirely on the use of kigo and figuring out how the seasonal separations worked. As I became more confident in my choice of seasonal words, I started adding cutting phrases and explored more complex ideas. Community was also a massive factor in my understanding of haiku. I participated in online spaces and in-person meetings to ask about haiku and request assistance. The in-person support that I received was a huge boost in my confidence and also a push to continue studying hard. Now, I'd like to share with you the basics of creating a haiku. First is the iconic syllable count. Haiku typically consists of 17 syllables arranged in a 5-7-5 meter. This is referred to as standard haiku or set form. While this 5-7-5 meter is the standard for haiku, there exist exceptions in the rules of haiku, wherein a poem with a slightly differing meter can be accepted as haiku, so long as it still embodies the spirit of haiku. Included in these exceptions are surplus character, short character, and phrase span haiku. Surplus character is simply a haiku with too many syllables. The extra syllables can be placed anywhere in the poem. Short character is a haiku lacking one or more syllables. Like surplus character, the syllable can be taken from any section of the poem. Phrase span is a haiku which still has 17 syllables, but the order of 5-7-5 is shifted. A haiku that reads as 7-5-5 would be an example of a phrase span haiku. Next is kigo. Kigo, or seasonal words, are words that define the season of a haiku. They are words that are recognized to embody some aspect of a specific season. Including kigo in haiku helps the reader to understand the seasonal setting of a work without overtly stating it. Nearly all kigo are confined to a designated season. For example, ramune, a popular Japanese soda, is a seasonal word that can only be used in summer. Using it during another season would be incorrect and wouldn't harness the true meaning of the seasonal word. Each season of the year is divided into 3 parts: early season, mid-season, and late season, all of which possess their own specific kigo. While each division within the season lasts around 30 days or 1 full month, starting and ending days on the calendar vary year by year, and they don't follow the Gregorian calendar. 3-month Kigo can be used throughout the entirety of the season, regardless of subdivision. Kireji. While not present in all haiku, kireji, or cutting phrases, are a literary device used to define the tone of a haiku. Ya is used when emphasizing the preceding word or words. It cuts a poem into 2 parts, inviting a reader to explore their interrelationship, and implies equation between the 2 parts. Keri is used in situations where you would like to emphasize the strength or decisiveness of a particular word, and kana is often used at the end of a haiku, though not exclusively. It indicates where an author's feelings are directed and offers a level of thoughtfulness to the phrase. While these cutting phrases are not the only ones that exist, they are by far the most popular. There are many analogies for describing how to create haiku. Among those is the idea that constructing haiku is similar to a game. This game-like sentiment can be found as far back in haiku's origins as the Muromachi period, when haiku was still only a greeting phrase for renga, back when people would group together and do this word game to bond with each other in times of war. As part of my research, I read and deconstructed the works of many famous haiku poets. Some examples I'd like to show today are the works of Matsuo Basho, Issa Kobayashi, and Richard Wright. An Ancient Pond by Matsuo Basho is decidedly the most famous haiku of all time. Created by the father of haiku himself, this work would shape the minds of many after as the standard or ideal for haiku poetry. This poem describes the act of a frog jumping into a pond and the sound that it makes. It offers itself towards a very peaceful scene, wherein the reader is offered to imagine the sound themselves. Seeing as this poem is seen as the standard for modern haiku, it naturally follows the set form phrase structure of 5-7-5. The kigo featured in this poem is frog, which implies the season of spring. The kireji, or cutting word, in this poem is ya, which gives emphasis to the age of the pond and also separates the scene from the action. Issa Kobayashi, regarded as a rather somber poet, wrote this phrase during a particularly nasty snowstorm, in which he contemplated the idea of it becoming his final resting place. It too follows the iconic 5-7-5 phrase structure, and the kireji used here is a much older cutting phrase, ga. Richard Wright was an American author famous for works other than haiku. During his final years of his life, he began writing haiku, and his work reflected his environment. As such, it's much more modern. This poem is a simple observation on the world around him, describing the scenery of tall skyscrapers leading to the gentle spring sea. Richard Wright also used a 5-7-5 phrase structure in his work and a kigo, that being spring sea. Due to the unique differences in language between English and Japanese, we do not see a kireji being used in this poem. As a native English speaker, my process in creating haiku has a few more steps when it comes to translating and understanding kigo. As such, every creative session starts with a review. I look up what kigo are appropriate to use for the season, and I rely on multiple physical and online saijiki for this process. I jot them down in a small pocketbook to take with me throughout my day. When I go out to brainstorm topics of haiku by myself, I allow myself to go slowly. I may take out my Saijiki or Kigo dictionary during my outing if I recall a phrase that I had not written down. I try out different compositions in both English and Japanese as I go. It gives me a moment to sit down and also notice more about my surroundings. I particularly like this slow method because it allows me time to re-observe the scene. Sometimes I will find something more interesting to focus on if I just wait for a few minutes. The process I follow when participating in group ginkgo, or outings, is a little more hurried than my solitary ginkgo. The goal of group ginkgo is typically to share a phrase at the end of the outing, so I prioritize having something readable rather than following every route of inspiration. During group ginkgo, I write all my ideas in English first. I don't focus on playing around with Kigo, and instead try to stick to my list of pre-selected seasonal words. Once I have a solid idea on a simple phrase in English, I try to translate it into Japanese while maintaining the 5-7-5 meter. My aim is to have a finished and understandable phrase for everyone to read by the end of the meeting. After the meeting, I revisit what I wrote down and try composing some of the ideas I found too challenging or time-consuming during the meeting. This might include posting my phrases online and asking a wider demographic for help. Okay, so I've been saying kukai and ginkgo a lot, but really, what are they? Well, kukai are meetings wherein haiku poets share their latest work and receive feedback from others. Typically, all phrases brought in to be critiqued have been written ahead of time, and there is little writing at the actual event itself. During the COVID-19 pandemic, online kukais were created as a means to continue collaboration. Many online groups are still active, and they're a great way to join in from wherever you'd like. Each kukai is unique in its proceedings and comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. In my case, all of the Kigo I have attended have been small-scale and casual events. The whole affair can be expected to take a few hours. The shortest kukai I attended was just over 4 hours, and the longest lasted around 6 hours. Poems are typically submitted on the day of the event. Each member brings their haikus written out in tate style, or vertical writing on a strip of paper. Some kukai allow members that are not present to submit their works via email to be critiqued during the meeting. At the first kukai I attended, there was no theme and many submissions from members not present, so our discussion varied wildly from effective use of Kigo to alternate phrasing, etc. The biggest concern was relatability. With around 4 people missing, there was no way to ask what they meant by a certain phrase or why they used one Kigo instead of another. It inspired a lot of discussion on just what a phrase could mean or if it had multiple meanings. In May, I attended a ginkgo held in Kyoto by a different group. We visited both Jizoin Temple and Suzumushidera Temple. Sticking together, we wrote down what we saw and also any Kigo that crossed our minds while viewing the beautiful sights. The majority of ginkgo is done in silence, not as a strict rule, but simply to promote thoughtfulness. Still, some members had knowledge on certain traditions or fun facts about the area and would share quietly with the other members of the group. The process there was slightly different, especially considering that half of the day was an excursion rather than a meeting. But much of the kukai portion was similar to my previous experience. Each member selected their favorite Kigo and each member of the group was challenged to create a phrase using that set of kigo on site. We had an hour and a half to create 3 to 5 phrases using the selected kigo. During our discussion time, we focused on whether or not we stayed on theme and conveyed the feelings of our trip. Most of the haikus were based on what we saw or experienced during our excursion. While I was initially nervous to attend haiku-related events, especially as someone with limited Japanese ability, I found that I was welcomed with open arms rather quickly. More experienced members of the group were happy to assist me in my writing and walk me through complicated phrases submitted by others. I enjoyed learning from others, and I'm grateful to the groups that I joined for being so open-minded and helpful. I feel that despite my inexperience with Japanese and writing Japanese haiku, we connected through our passion for creating. Here are some of the haiku that I created during my time in Japan. Most of my phrases focus on some form of nature or weather phenomena, as these kigo are just a little more universal than cultural events. In particular, I focused on flowers and rain, which reminded me of my home back in America. I tried to keep my meter to 575 in both Japanese and English, but it's a little bit difficult to do when you're translating a language. This haiku I submitted to a kukai for critique. It's about a dog playing in a patch of white clover, and it was inspired by a dog I saw during one of my solitary ginkgo. I saw a Shiba Inu rubbing their face in the damp grass and clover after their owner left for a drink, and then straighten up once again when they were back. I wanted to describe the playfulness the dog exuded in that moment. My initial draft looked like this. Shiba Inu ga shirotsume kusa de asonda. Or, the Shiba Inu plays in the white clovers. This draft was short a character. The final line only has 4 characters, which means that it was only 16 syllables. There also was no cutting phrase. After attending a kukai and asking for assistance, my haiku looked like this. Shiba Inu ga kurouba hata de asonda. Or a Shiba Inu plays in the fields of clover. With the assistance of some other members at my kukai, some aspects of the phrase changed, like the syllable count in kigo. My haiku still did not include a cutting phrase, however. So, why did I change it in this way? The 2 biggest reasons were my choice of kigo and the syllable count. The word I used initially for white clover, shirotsume kusa, while correct, also had a connotation of being used in solemn settings, which directly contradicted the fun image I was trying to portray. With the help of another member, we changed the seasonal word to Cloverfield. This seemed perfect, as the extra syllable in kurouba hata pushed the poem's length up to 17 syllables, which made it a standard form haiku. Studying in haiku in Japan allowed me the opportunity to start to grasp haiku as a whole. I was able to access many opportunities I wouldn't have known about in my home country and talk to many people with interests in haiku. I have developed a deeper love for haiku as an art form and will continue to study it after returning to the United States. I'd like to thank Labo and all the wonderful people that have supported me during this journey. I am excited to see where my studies will take me once I return to my home country. Now, are you ready for quiz time? Let's see if you've remembered everything I said during this presentation. Question 1. Who is considered the father of haiku? Is it A, Isha Kobayashi, B, Richard Wright, or C, Matsuo Basho? The answer is C. Matsuo basho. Question 2. Which cutting word is used to show that the author's thoughts are focused on something? Is it A, kire, B, kana, or C, ya? The answer is B, kana. Okay, our third and final question. Is it true or false that frog is a kido for late summer? The answer is false. Frog is a seasonal word used in spring. This concludes my presentation on the art of haiku. I hope this has inspired you to go out and create on your own. Thank you all for your time and support. Bye-bye!